Puerto Rico, The Aftermath of Hurricane Maria by Alyssa Stribe. So what happened? Hurricane Maria was the worst hurricane experience in Puerto Rico in over 80 years. Maria spiked in size overnight, and by the time she reached the southeastern coast of Puerto Rico, she was a strong Category 4. There were winds well over 100 miles an hour, and because of that, the entire electrical grid for the island was eliminated. The storm lasted for almost 12 hours, and in that time, it was able to cover the span of the island and wipe out everything in its path. Damage done by Maria. Almost the entire island was without power, and at least 60% of the people were left with no clean drinking water. 80% of the crops on the island were destroyed. There were dozens of people killed by mudslides and flooding, and the rest of the deaths were caused by lack of electricity to keep hospitals running. There were almost no accessible roads for weeks afterwards, and the roads that were made accessible were done by civilians with machetes. Due to flooding, there was also a dam break near Guataca River that took multiple lives and destroyed hundreds of homes. The United States' response to the issue. Puerto Rico is a known territory belonging to the United States, meaning that there are certain obligations America has to provide to Puerto Rico. Overall, it took 3 days for American ships to make it to the shores, and those ships brought FEMA and Red Cross workers. A couple months later, phone and electricity companies sent their own workers to help rebuild power lines and local power plants. It also took the United States 3 days to lift the Jones Act, finally making it so Puerto Rico could accept imports from the United States and other countries without the high tax. There are still American workers there from the electricity companies trying to get the power up in the mountain areas that still haven't been reached by the government. And here are a couple images of the destruction seen directly after Hurricane Maria and they're still experiencing in the region. So death toll and issues that still remain. The actual death toll in Puerto Rico is around 5,000 casualties. This includes those who died during the hurricane and those who died after due to the complications like lack of electricity and drinkable water. Because of the lack of electricity, hospitals were unable to keep medicines cold and dialysis machines running. There was also a large amount of people who died of heat stroke and heart attacks since there was no air conditioning available. The issue that still remains are there's still unreliable electricity, water shortages, and remaining infrastructure damage. Since the power grid is still being repaired, the electricity is shut off strategically by the government to prevent overuse. The same goes for water, since there are still shortages in places like San Juan, the capital city, and they have designated days in the week where they do not have access to water at all. So the potential solutions to the problems that remain include one of the biggest criticisms heard personally from friends and family in Puerto Rico is of the government entirely in its inaction. So the government in Puerto Rico suffers from extreme corruption, leading officials to pick companies that serve in their best interest to do repairs. Their best interest is to keep the repairs as cheap and minimal as possible. The best example of this is electricity company PREPA. PREPA has been known to overcharge people for power they aren't using, and when they're not paid, they cut the power to the entire neighborhoods. My own family has been a victim to this as well. The solution to the governmental problem in Puerto Rico for Puerto Rican people is to pay attention to who they elect. They need both a head of state and a head of government. Although the United States government played a small role in helping Puerto Rico, the best way for them to recover is to take matters into their own hands and elect people who will stop partaking in tax cuts for necessary things like power grids and solar fields. And here are my sources.